you guys ready? I'm gonna prevent you guys from, or we are gonna prevent you guys from falling into siesta mode with a super exciting topic today with four experts in Latin America. We're gonna be talking about how to successfully expand in Latin America. So let me first introduce very quickly myself. I'm Antonio Iglesias, Managing Director of Endeavor in Spain. Endeavor is a global nonprofit organization that supports high impact entrepreneurs. We are present in 36 countries, and you'll be asking, what's the high impact entrepreneur? What we're looking for is people that are leading scale ups that have a really strong potential for exponential growth and job creation. But most importantly, we're looking for leaders that are ecosystem creators. We're looking for individuals that will help other entrepreneurs, that are going to mentor other entrepreneurs, and at the end, the result of this is that we have a global, very strong network of high-impact entrepreneurs that are constantly helping each other. Why am I here with these great experts? Because we have a really strong presence in Latin America. That's actually where Endeavor started over 20 years ago. And we've helped many companies expand in the region, and of course, many Spanish companies too. But I'm not going to be doing the talking. That's all you're going to hear from me today. We're going to let the experts talk about this exciting topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to repeat what Alex said. So I'm going to just say the name of my co-panelists, and they are going to tell you very quickly who they are, what they do, and so you'll understand why they're here today. So I'm going to start with Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us. I hope you will enjoy it and you will not fall asleep. My name is Nicole Wolpert. I'm the director of Latin America of Orcam. Orcam is an Israeli company. We do devices for people with disabilities. Okay, we use artificial intelligence, and we make devices such as this. This is the Orcam My Eye. I will not do a demo here, but if somebody is interested to see a demo, for sure, after the panel, we don't have enough time. But what the device does is that it records the world, okay? This camera checks text, faces, identify colors, etc. And the information, it goes through the little audio, okay? We call it bocina, the speaker,
Yep.
okay? And it talks to the user. So it says to him, you have a person in front of you, you have a woman in front of you. It reads text for you immediately. So it makes a person with visual impairment or that are completely blind very, very independent. It gives them a better quality of life.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Carlos, you're next.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Carlos Fernandez Pradilla. I'm founder and CFO of Polymath Ventures. Polymath Ventures is a company builder located in Bogotá and Ciudad de Mexico. We are not an incubator, nor accelerator, nor a VC fund. We build the companies and we help them to grow. And we are focused on building companies for the middle class in Latin America and using digital services to improve their lives and their services, basically. We have 6 companies. We launched 9, so we are dealing with some casualties in the portfolio, and we are mostly focused on financial inclusion, mobility, e-commerce, and labor market.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Margarita?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Margarita Escobar. I'm a congresswoman from El Salvador. As you can imagine, my main job is to legislate. My problem is to legislate, particularly in new technologies. As you know, technologies have changed the way we legislate. What type of laws are convenient? What type of issues do we need to look at? What kind of societies are going to be legislating for in the future? These questions are very, very tough to answer, in particular for a congresswoman. Nevertheless, at the moment, we are working on some pieces of legislation that we think are important, keeping in mind that we cannot be afraid of technology. We cannot be afraid of the unknown. We cannot be afraid of uncertainty. And if we need to change the law because we made a mistake, we will do it when the time comes. But it's important to have this attitude when it comes to producing legislation. So currently we're working on a piece of legislation to incentive digital economy, particularly with fiscal incentives and other incentives that if we have time I will get into it. Creative economy also, there is another legislation that we're working on, or orange economy. We're working also on data protection, personal data protection in habeas data, which has become a main issue in the world, I would say, the issue of personal data protection. And we are also working on universal internet access, which is the materia prima for all these issues. There is a lot more, but I thank Summit, the South Summit, and the organizers, and all of you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm sure we're going to have some time to get into some of the details of that. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Margarita. And our last guest, Ian Noel.
Thank you very much. In my case, my experience is more focused on venture capital, software companies, early stage venture capital. I've been for 16 years investing in startups, 8 years in Bonsai Venture Capital. I co-founded a 50 million euro venture capital called K Fund. I spent a whole year traveling through Latin America, working and starting a venture capital which didn't succeed in the end because I later on started K Fund. And now I'm starting a new kind of venture capital called Squad Ventures that puts a huge focus into the operational value add that's so much needed in startups.
Thank you so much, Ian. So we are going to start with the why, the famous why, right? And this is a question for the four of you. Why should companies bet on Latin America?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think from an expansion point of view, and obviously based on different industries that we will have time to talk afterwards, at the end in Latin America you will find a significant macro support. One thing that is important to understand regarding the region is that you need to have a long-term view, because also the volatility is a huge risk in the region, but at the end you need to look into the long-term patterns. And for me, the second key reason to look into this region from a innovation and a startup point of view is that it's a region in which the traditional way to compete, the region has been falling behind. But under the new rules of the digital economy, we strongly believe that there are new opportunities to make this region to grow faster than it did in the past. No? Understanding that and understanding that digital economy can be the trigger to change completely the how this region has been being structured and performed, and especially regarding the middle class, I think that's one of the key elements that needs to be in the agenda of governments, but also the startups. No? Understanding that the region is in a process of change, it has some macro support that other regions they don't have, and therefore it's something that startups needs to have in their agenda.
Thanks. Any other points of view?
Well, I think that Latin America is a good area to invest for several reasons. Number one, technology has made us all a smaller world, and Latin America, being a part of it, is obviously a great site to look at and to invest. Second, there is political stability in the region with a couple of exceptions that we're not going to get into that. I think you know what I'm talking about. So it's finally a political stability in the region with democratic governments. Thirdly, there is a new wave of leadership coming into board, a new generation to lead our countries and to lead our cities. Also, I think in the case of El Salvador, we have, it's not so much the country what counts, but the cities. And for example, the city of San Salvador is being led by the mayor, Ernesto Mason, who is bidding a lot in innovation and investment with public and private sectors. The universities are also changing and promoting a big higher educational reform to make markets and education connect. I think there's a lot of talent in Latin America. I think there's a lot of space in Latin America. And I think there's a lot of thirst in Latin America to be a part of it.
Ian, you or me? I think, first of all, is necessity. There's a strong necessity in Latin America for many new technologies. The reason why we entered Latin America was that we had demand. People were asking us, please come to Brazil, please come to Argentina, please come to Mexico. So I think this is a key. And when you understand the necessity of a country and a government and your future clients, you know, then you got, you know, the key for success. Now, also, apart from that, it's a huge market. Like, we should not forget, only Mexico is 120 million people. And it's not only 120 million people, it's 120 million consumers. They do consume. They actually buy big TVs and cell phones, and they are investing in their technologies. So we should have that in mind. I think Latin America is not a focus for most, at least for where I come, which is Israel. Israel, the Israeli startups, they immediately see the US, and we understand why. But Latin America is not a region we should not look at all, specifically technologies that could fit in the markets.
My take on this thing is, besides the size of the market, which is really big and it's growing, besides Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and those other big countries that constitute LATAM, it's a huge market. That's no doubt. Besides that, there are two things that I think that are really important in order to technologies to thrive, right? Which is capital and talent. And I think those two things are in place already. There is no huge equity gap in any layer of the early stage growth. There's even a later stage 5 billion fund from Softbank dedicated fully to LATAM. We don't have that in Europe, for example. I mean, and in LATAM they have a huge later stage, which is very important for the health of the market. And in terms of talent, I wanted to start this fund 5 years ago, and I would say it wasn't everything in its place. Regarding talent, you would see amazing entrepreneurs from Stanford or Harvard coming into LATAM back again and starting new companies, and they weren't able to raise C-level executives with huge experience. Now there's angels that have exited, the previous entrepreneurs that have exited and turned into angels. Know-how is recycling into the ecosystem, and previous CMOs from small startups turn into big startups, and they now are raising a company again. So the talent is recycling again, and the VCs now have invested for over a decade, so they have the experience as well. It's not the first cycle of VCs. They have a second or third generation of funds. So I think talent is in place, capital is in place, and the market is huge. So why not take Latin America into account?
May I support one thing regarding the capital part? I think it's important to share, and Ian mentioned the Softbank fund, which is devoted only for Latin America. It's 5 billion fund to be invested in just in 2 years, and they are doing in paid after 1 year. This is double of the size of the industry, just one fund. But the thing is, and we are seeing that it's not only Softbank. It's at the end, what Softbank has made is to put Latin America on the spot. And for the 7 years that I've been doing this in Latin America, it's the first time I feel that I'm not wondering why I'm in Latin America, because previously it was the worst region in the world to do venture capital, mostly because of the lack of capital. And right now, this is not the problem. It's not solving the whole funding path, but it's dragging a lot of investors. On that sense, I think that right now it's cool to have a project in Latin America, which from the investment part is important and also allows entrepreneurs to go there.
And if I may add, also the Inter-American Development Bank on the issue of development is also putting on the spot the issue of orange economy and giving it a lot of visibility to the countries. And I think that also helps from the development point of view.
Absolutely.
You guys can see the passion, right? If you were thinking about expanding in Latin America, I hope these guys are convincing you. So the beauty of this panel is that we have four very different profiles. So I'm going to have one specific question for each one of you guys so you can explain from your own point of view how to expand in Latin America. And I'm going to start with you, Nicole.
Again with me, just because I'm the youngest. No.
Exactly, or because
Go,
you're
go.
right here.
It's okay.
So the you guys, you're the only company operating in Latin America from these guys. So when you guys made a decision to open office in Latin America, what was the approach? Why did you decide to go to Mexico, right? How did you think about countries, channels, product, etc.?
Yeah. Well, actually, there wasn't any strategy behind it. It was just pure demand. We started, I arrived to Orcam 2 years ago. We already had 4 distributors and 4 countries. And this happened because, again, they were contacting us and deciding, you know what, we want to be your representative and let us start working. And they started working without even having devices in their language, okay, in their local language. It was only in English. So when I go in and the company understands that they need some kind of contact with Latin America, I started 2 years ago. Now we are 11 countries and 14 distributors.
Wow.
We work through distributors because today we can't get into all of the countries. You know, it's extremely difficult. The nuances of each country is very difficult. It's true, and I think that's related to the other question we had, why Latin America? The countries are relatively similar. Most of them have the same language, except of Brazil, and governmental and the situation is relatively similar. So that helps in a way. But at the same time, you can't go and be there every day, no, as I do. We started working we work today with distributors, and they do it through different channels, okay? As a company that is dedicated for devices for people with disabilities, we usually, our natural partner will be or a low vision company or a company related to people with disabilities or things like that that do exist, for example, in Europe. In Latin America, because of the lack of conscience towards people with disability, we have zero that.
Oh, well.
So all our work has been trial. Like you try here, it doesn't work. You try here, it doesn't work. We usually, when we look for a representative, we usually get help from the embassies of Israel in different places. And the first question a commercial attaché will ask is, what is the profile of your distributor? I'm a distributor agnostic. Why? Because in one place this works, in the other place it just doesn't work, okay? And it's just trial and error. So now I think we've been establishing for some time our activity there, and it's starting to grow. But again, we have many issues related to government. Our main work here in Europe is with government. The government subsidized the ORCAM for people with disabilities, okay? From 50% to 100%, depends on the country. In Mexico, people that are blind don't even get a cane from the government. So imagine what I'm dealing with. But we're doing our job.
Nice. Well, congrats. That's
Thank
an
you.
amazing story. So next one for Carlos. What opportunities are you seeing in the region in terms of business models or as an investor?
Yeah, when you look into Latin America, I think you do it from a European or US standpoint. I think you need to look and to do a step back and also think about the lack of infrastructure that the region has. No? On that front, or the way we see, and always focus on middle class. No, we are not talking about base of pyramid, nor not the upscale class. At the end, you have a lack of infrastructure that is not allowing that middle class to get the services. So that's why we see that from one standpoint, you need to build those infrastructure. You need to build a logistic infrastructure in the whole region if you want to have e-commerce, for example. You need to build the education infrastructure in order to develop things like the orange economy, for example. And once you also have the financial inclusion and the financial services infrastructure is when you can start adding up different services. So At the end, it's quite basic in terms of the needs of the region, are not complex. At the end, the way they live is structured is quite simple. Business model does not need to be very innovative, but you need to use technology under those infrastructure in order to build those services. No, that's the way we see it. And in terms of, as I said, the logistic part, the mobility part is a huge problem because of the density of the cities. The financial inclusion is something that needs to be solved, and digital service is I think, will have a huge impact. And once you get out of the cities, you have all the agro part, which again, and I think in that front, the example like Israel, I think is key. In the agro wall is a completely different opportunity than the cities, but as well you have big opportunities.
So lots of opportunities in the region. That's great. So Margarita, you mentioned before that you need a lot of time to go deeper into some of the things that you in particular are doing, or you see other governments doing in terms of promoting entrepreneurship, foreign investment, and making business easier in general. Can you elaborate a little more on this?
Sure, I think it's important. That question is very important, and I will try to briefly tell you what we're doing. First of all, regulations. We're trying to make regulations very simple. We passed a law in Congress to make it obligatory for all the public sector to, to be simple. You know, bureaucratic processes are really a pain, and they can kill a startup or an innovation or a business, and we are aware of that. So we came with a very strong piece of legislation to make just that. Secondly, we also took in the Congress another step forward, which is to create in Congress a committee precisely to overlook at all the pieces of regulations that we don't make one step forwards and two backwards in other pieces of legislations that may come across. Coherence in the legislation, coherence in public policies, the relevance of the law, the relevance of public policy, the relevance of leadership is very important. If you have a leader that believes in innovation, if you have entrepreneurs that want to do it, well, why not? And we are aware of that, and we have decided to go that way in that path. Also, the relevance of national development banks, investment banks, along with, I mentioned IDB and also the Softbank that just put $5 billion. We haven't gotten a penny yet. I hope that they're listening and they come to El Salvador soon. They might, yes. I think LATAM needs to do a book like this, El Referente, which contains all the startups in Latin America. We don't have one, as far as I know, and I think it would be a great, great tool for everybody to produce it. Maybe South Summit could to help us with that, since this is a point. And another relevant point, I think, is have open cities that foster innovation. They can be regulators, but they also can be customers. They can invest in private and public sectors. And we do have an APP law precisely to foster co-investment between the public and the private sector. And another thing that I think is very important is the relevancy of being happy, the relevance of enjoying it, the relevance of knowing that you're doing something meaningful for your people, for the country, for your city, for the humanity.
Thank you so much. So
Thank you.
This is happening, right?
It's happening.
So Ian, based on your experience, what is the role of a co-investor? In particular, how can a co-investor help in Latin America context?
I think it can be pretty important, really. It's not often taken into account, a local co-investor. You always kind of fund your company from Spain and then expand internationally, or have a global investor. And not everybody expanding into Latin America takes into account a local Mexican VC or Chilean VC or Colombian VC in order to expand into Latin America, or in order to plan that expansion, right? I think what I would do if I was an entrepreneur was to start traveling to Latin America and, ask clients what they think about your proposal, your market, your take on that market, and especially investors. And if you raise money from a Mexican VC to expand into Mexico, you're in the right way. I mean, it means you have a right product market fit, you have the right kind of experience, you have local money, which means they might be able to help you raise local talent. They can make intros to corporate clients or whatever. And something which is very, very important, which Carlos mentioned, is they help you understand the fine-tuning and the local adaptation from your product or your service so that it matches the demand, the local demand, which is not always obvious. We come with a European mentality, and you need to change things, and it's much better to ask for help from local people that have no conflicts of interest, and they are aligned, they have equity investment in your company, and they have a special motivation to help you, and they live there, they know the market, so they help you adapt, and raise talent. Talent is the number one issue in order to expand successfully. You can always have a lot of capital, but if you import European talent into Mexico to expand, maybe you have the right kind of management, top-level management, the right kind of marketing skills or whatever, but they don't know the local market. And it's all about knowing the local market. So I would ask for help from local people, and try to gain their trust, their investment, or their help. Having a local big family, one of the big families that control many of the countries, they invest in startups as well. Why not ask for money to them?
I think the point of the families is super key, and is one of for me, the most different thing in Latin America regarding how the economic structure is built is like the power of groups and families in Latin America is completely different that you can find in Europe or in the US. And I think that's a super important path in order to get into the region. And right now, fortunately, they are starting to become much more sophisticated in terms of investment, and they are more open because they used to be super close, because at the end their power was based on how close and how they control the distribution channels, and this is not longer going to happen. And some of them they have understood. So if I have to give the advice in terms of, okay, who should I partner with, I will look definitely into the family side, because they could be a really good partner in order to the entry. And my final last comment that Ian also mentioned is the need to adapt the products and the services. Copycat doesn't work in Latin America. As long as you can think that we are super similar in terms of cultures, at the end, the economic infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure, and the cultural economic behaviors are very different, and you have a huge amount of informality that is super hard to fight against too. So you need to adapt your products as well.
Awesome.
I would like to add one more thing. I think there's enough women here. I do, in this process of working with distributors and working in an Israeli corporation, which is already some kind of, there's already an obstacle and a challenge to come and explain Mexicans or Latin Americans the Israeli mentality or Israeli mentality of Latin Americans. Also being a woman and young, it's something that does at the beginning kind of cause some kind of, they don't know how to deal with me so much at the beginning. So that's something that if you do a good job and you're professional and you don't make an issue out of it, it works out. But today in Latin America is still a very machista, they're still very machistas, and most of the men are the ones that are doing business as all the world, but not as strong as in Latin America.
Can I also add one word
you have
about
36
copycat?
seconds.
Copycat, in legislation, you cannot do that. It's the recipe for failure. Just because one country is successful with this particular law doesn't mean that it will work in El Salvador. So it also goes in Congress. And as far as the women issue, it doesn't have to be young or old. Women, we have a challenge, and we need to work at that issue also.
For me, sorry, not being nor
Last
woman
one. I'm
nor
not gonna let
young,
anybody else.
what I have to say is that for us, woman is this key element of success of Latin America. At the end, they control more than 70% of the middle class spend. Fortunately, they are the ones controlling it, and they are the ones that really need to be supported to change the region. So.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. You guys see all the passion, so thank you so much for
Thank you.
your insights.